There are wounds the mind lets go of easily, and there are wounds that cling to you like a shadow that refuses to fall behind. And so maybe the real question isn't why did they hurt you? Maybe the real question is this: why does your heart keep returning to the place where it broke? Why does their face still appear in the quiet moments? Why does a part of you still replay their words, their actions, trying to understand, trying to rewrite what can't be rewritten? This is not weakness. This is not obsession. This is something far more ancient, far more psychological, and far more human than we ever admit. Because when someone wounds you deeply, they don't just leave a memory. They leave an imprint, a psychological fingerprint pressed into the softest parts of your inner world. As Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." And the people who hurt us often slip into the unconscious faster than anyone else. They become part of the inner cast of characters shaping us from the shadows. You're not stuck on them. You're entangled with what they awakened. Maybe it was an old fear, an old need, an old longing that has been sleeping inside you since childhood. Jung believed we are drawn to the people who mirror our inner wounds, not because we want suffering, but because the psyche is trying to heal something unfinished. In Jung's view, the heart keeps returning not to the person, but to the part of ourselves that met them. This is why forgetting them feels impossible. You're not trying to forget them. You're trying to forget the version of you that cracked open in their presence. And that version of you needs to be heard. There's a strange pull that happens after someone hurts you. Even when you know the chapter should be closed, something inside you keeps tracing the outline of the story. Not because you want them back, and not because the pain felt good, no. It's because the psyche hates unfinished sentences. It hates emotional loose ends. And when someone wounds you, they often leave you standing in the middle of a sentence that never received its ending. You think you're longing for them, but what you're really longing for is resolution. The human heart isn't built to carry unanswered questions. It wants clarity, meaning, closure. And when it can't get those things from the outside, it starts searching for them inside. That's why your mind replays memories like a movie you didn't enjoy, but keep watching anyway, hoping this time you'll understand the scene you missed, the sign you ignored, the moment everything shifted. As Carl Jung said, we are always seeking the lost pieces of ourselves. And the person who hurt you often holds a reflection of something you've been missing within. Sometimes it's your need to be seen. Sometimes it's an old wound that never healed right. Sometimes it's a part of you that you abandoned long before they ever appeared. This is why the heart clings, not out of love, but out of instinct. The psyche keeps circling back because somewhere inside, something is unfinished. And the person who hurt you becomes a symbol, a container for all that unresolved emotion. It's not the person. It's the meaning your soul attached to the moment. And here's the quiet truth almost no one tells you. Being unable to forget them isn't a failure. It's a sign that your inner world is calling you deeper. Jung believed that when a pattern repeats in your mind, it's not a memory malfunction, it's an invitation. An invitation to look at the parts of yourself you've been trying not to see. The echo of their presence is really the echo of your own shadow asking to be acknowledged. You don't need them back. You need to understand what they represented. And that understanding is where healing begins. There's a moment, usually quiet and unexpected, when you realize that the person who hurt you has become more than a memory. They've become an inner presence, a symbol, an echo inside your emotional landscape. And suddenly you're not just remembering what happened, you're feeling it again, as if your body itself is trying to speak a language your mind keeps ignoring. Because pain isn't stored in logic, it's stored in the nervous system. That's why even months later, even years later, one small trigger, a smell, a tone of voice, a familiar type of silence, can pull you back into the emotional world you thought you'd escaped. It's not the person pulling you back. It's your own unprocessed story. Carl Jung once wrote that the psyche never forgets what it hasn't finished feeling. And that's the real reason some people linger in your thoughts long after they're gone. The emotional experience with them wasn't completed. Something inside you froze in the moment of impact. Something was left suspended, unheard, unmet. You keep thinking about them because your inner world is still trying to thaw. This is why you can't just move on by willpower. You can't bark orders at a scar and expect it to disappear. The psyche operates on its own time, the time of depth, of symbols, of subconscious meaning. And the person who hurt you becomes a knot woven from past and present, from longing and fear, from who you were and who you're becoming. In Jung's view, this knot isn't a mistake. It's guidance. The psyche ties knots around the places it wants you to return to, not to suffer, but to understand, to see what you couldn't see in the moment, to reclaim a part of yourself that got trapped in the emotional shock. The reason you keep thinking about them is that a part of you is still standing in the moment they created, still waiting for something, acknowledgement, protection, closure, or perhaps the self-respect you lost trying to be enough for them. You're not haunted by the person. You're haunted by the version of you that wasn't protected. And until you turn toward that inner figure, the one who felt small, overlooked, dismissed, your psyche will keep bringing the memory back, gently but persistently, like a hand tapping on a closed door. Not to torment you, but to bring you home to yourself. There's something almost paradoxical about the way the mind holds on to the people who hurt us. It feels unfair, even humiliating at times, as if the heart should know better, as if memory should protect you, not pull you backward. But the psyche doesn't operate on pride. It operates on symbolism. And the person who hurt you becomes a symbol far sooner than you realize. You think you're remembering them, but you're remembering what your soul hoped to find in them. Every human carries an inner image of love, a blueprint shaped by childhood, shaped by needs that were met and needs that were dismissed. Carl Jung called these blueprints complexes, clusters of emotion and expectation living inside the unconscious, shaping our reactions without asking permission. And when someone enters your life who activates one of these complexes, it doesn't matter if the relationship is healthy or painful. The intensity is instant, magnetic, almost faded. That intensity is why you can't forget. They didn't just enter your life. They entered your inner architecture. Maybe they awakened your longing to be chosen. Maybe they touched your fear of abandonment. Maybe they stirred your deepest hunger for tenderness. Maybe they mirrored something you'd kept hidden even from yourself. And when they hurt you, they didn't just break trust. They cracked open the very complex your psyche had wrapped around them. The pain feels so deep not because of who they are, but because of what they represented inside you. In Jung's view, that's why letting go feels impossible. You're not trying to release a person, you're trying to release a symbol woven into your emotional foundation. And here is the truth we seldom speak aloud. The psyche will cling to a painful bond if it believes that bond holds the key to something unfinished. It would rather replay old wounds than abandon the hope of understanding them. That replaying is not weakness. It is a form of inner intelligence. A signal that something in your emotional universe is still unresolved, still unintegrated, still waiting for you to turn toward it with honesty instead of avoidance. So when you can't stop thinking about the one who hurt you, remember this: your mind isn't betraying you. It's calling you deeper. The memory is not a prison, it's a map pointing toward the exact place inside you where healing is waiting to begin. There's a moment in every healing journey when you start to wonder, was it really them I wanted, or was it the feeling I thought they could give me? This question stings because it pulls you out of the illusion that the person who hurt you still has something you need. But the truth is sharper and much more liberating. You're not attached to the person. You're attached to the emotional promise your psyche projected onto them. Carl Jung said that the people who affect us most intensely, positively, or painfully are often carrying pieces of our own unconscious. Not because they're special, but because we unconsciously assign them a role in our inner theater. They become the mirror we didn't know we were looking for. And when someone plays a role we desperately needed, the role of approval, warmth, safety, or familiarity, the psyche binds quickly, instinctively. So when they hurt you, it's not just disappointment. It's a psychological rupture. The image you built around them collapses, and your inner world scrambles to understand what happened. This is why forgetting feels impossible. The psyche is trying to reconcile the dream with the reality. You're not replaying their betrayal. You're replaying the moment the illusion shattered. There's another layer here, one Jung spoke about often: the shadow. The parts of ourselves we reject, minimize, or pretend not to need. Sometimes the person who hurt you reflects a shadow you've been avoiding. Your vulnerability, your longing, your fear of being overlooked, your desire to be chosen without having to fight for it. And when that person leaves, or lies, or dismisses you, it's the shadow that gets triggered, not just the heart. The shadow wakes up and demands attention. This is why your thoughts circle back even when you logically know the relationship is over. You're not addicted to the pain. You're circling around the part of you that got exposed. And here's the part almost no one says out loud. The reason the wound feels so alive is because a part of you is finally trying to speak. The part that stayed quiet during the relationship. The part that swallowed its own needs. The part that believed just a little more patience, a little more softness, a little more effort would earn the love you wanted. You don't miss them. You miss the version of yourself who still believed. And until you face that version with compassion instead of shame, the memory will keep returning, not to torment you, but to guide you toward the truth hiding underneath the pain. There comes a point where you stop asking why they did what they did, and you start asking why it still lives so vividly inside you. Why their absence feels heavier than their presence ever did. Why the hurt doesn't fade the way you were promised it would. And the deeper you look, the more you realize this isn't about logic, it's about imprint. When someone wounds you at a vulnerable moment, the psyche marks that moment as significant. Not because the person was significant, but because you were open in a way you rarely are. You were unguarded, available, receptive. And as Carl Jung wrote, what is touched in vulnerability becomes part of the soul's memory. That's why the shock stays. That's why the story loops. The wound didn't just bruise your heart. It disrupted your sense of meaning. People imagine healing as forgetting. But forgetting isn't healing, it's suppression. And the psyche refuses to suppress what it believes holds a key to your inner evolution. That's why the memory resurfaces at the worst times. Why your mind suddenly drifts back to them in moments of stress or loneliness. Your unconscious is trying to finish a psychological equation you never had the tools to solve. Jung believed that the psyche seeks wholeness in every experience, even the painful ones. If something remains unresolved, your inner world keeps circling it like a planet around a star. Not to punish you, but because something essential is orbiting at the center of that pain. Maybe the wound triggered an old story about being overlooked. Maybe it awakened a longing for reassurance you never truly received. Maybe it uncovered a fear you thought you'd outgrown. And because these emotions were never fully named, they cling to the person who triggered them. Not because they're the answer, but because they were the catalyst. This is the part most people misunderstand. Your mind isn't trying to return to the relationship. It's trying to return to the moment inside you that still feels split, confused, or unseen. You're not searching for them. You're searching for the part of yourself that disappeared during the pain. And until that part is acknowledged, heard, and integrated, the memory will stay active, like a light left on in an empty room, waiting for you to come back and finally see what's inside. There's a quiet truth most people never admit. The person who hurt you often becomes the person your mind uses to measure everything afterward. Not because they were extraordinary, but because the emotional impact carved a shape inside you. A shape you now compare other experiences to, even without realizing it. And that comparison becomes its own kind of haunting. It's not that you want them back. It's that your nervous system still believes the story isn't finished. Carl Jung wrote that what remains unresolved within us becomes fate, repeating itself, echoing through our choices, appearing in new faces wearing old emotional patterns. This is why you might find yourself drawn to similar dynamics, similar disappointments, similar people who stir familiar emotions. It's not because you're broken. It's because your psyche is trying to resolve the original wound by reenacting it. You're not remembering the past. You're trying to fix it. The person who hurt you becomes a symbol of that unfinished repair. A symbol of the moment your heart wasn't defended, your voice wasn't heard, your boundaries weren't honored. And your psyche keeps returning to them, not to cling, but to understand the fault line inside you that opened in their presence. This is why you can't just close the chapter. Your story with them is part of a larger story within you. There's another layer Jung spoke of, the anima and animus, the inner feminine and inner masculine energies within every person. When someone hurts you, they often injure the inner balance of these forces. Perhaps your inner strength felt compromised. Perhaps your inner softness felt unsafe. Perhaps your inner protector stepped aside when you needed it most. And that internal imbalance is what keeps your thoughts circling. You're not longing for the person. You're longing to restore the part of yourself that collapsed. Every time your mind drifts back to them, it's not a failure, it's communication. A message from your deeper self. Something inside me still needs rebuilding. And until that reconstruction begins, the memory remains active, not as a craving, but as a reminder. Because the psyche refuses to let you forget what you still need to heal. There comes a moment when you realize that the pain isn't living in the memory anymore. It's living in your body. It's in the tightening of your chest when something reminds you of them. It's in the heaviness behind your ribs when you hear a phrase they used to say. It's in the quiet loneliness that rises even when you're surrounded by people. And you start to understand that forgetting was never the issue. The real issue is what the experience changed inside you. Carl Jung wrote that the body carries truths the mind is not yet ready to see. And when someone hurts you deeply, your body becomes the keeper of that story. That's why certain emotions feel physically heavy. That's why your breath changes when you think of the moment they left, lied, or disappointed you. Your nervous system is still bracing for impact that already happened. You're not stuck in the past. Your body is stuck in protection mode. Because in that moment of hurt, your whole inner world reorganized itself around survival. Your instincts tightened. Your emotions retreated. Your trust recalibrated. And until those inner defenses feel safe enough to soften, the memory remains vivid, active, alive. Jung believed that what the psyche cannot accept, it stores as a kind of inner freeze, a suspended emotion, waiting. And the person who hurt you becomes the symbol that emotion clings to, because they were the catalyst for its creation. Not because they deserve that place in your memory, but because the emotion needs a face. This is why you can't stop thinking about them. The mind is trying to thaw what froze. Sometimes, the mind revisits the hurt not to re-experience it, but to finally process it. To allow the body to exhale for the first time. To let the emotion complete the movement it was denied. To let your inner protector return to its rightful place. You're not trying to reconnect with the person. You're trying to reconnect with yourself. And until that reconnection feels whole, until the inner freeze melts into understanding, until the body feels safe again, until your inner world trusts its own strength, the memory will echo, softly but persistently. Not because you failed to forget, but because your healing hasn't yet been fully heard. There's a moment in this journey when the pain begins to change shape. It stops feeling like an open wound and starts feeling like a doorway, a passage into parts of yourself you never knew were waiting. And this is where the real truth begins to emerge. The reason you can't forget the person who hurt you is because their presence cracked open a piece of your inner world that had been sealed for years, maybe even decades. Carl Jung wrote that the people who disturb us the most are often the ones who carry the key to our unconscious. Not because they are wise or special or meant for us, but because they strike the exact place where our deepest work lies. They touch the buried layers, the old heartbreaks, the forgotten fears, the abandoned needs, the longing we denied, the voice we silenced to be loved. The hurt they caused didn't start with them. It awakened something older. Maybe it was the feeling of being overlooked. Maybe it was the ache of not being chosen. Maybe it was the fear of being too much or not enough. Maybe it was the desperation to finally feel safe in someone else's hands. And when they hurt you, they didn't just break trust. They illuminated the original wound beneath it all. This is why forgetting them feels impossible. The psyche isn't trying to hold on to the person. The psyche is holding on to the lesson. Jung believed that whatever we avoid will return again and again in different faces until we finally turn toward it with consciousness. The memory of the one who hurt you is not a trap, it's a signal. A signal that your soul is ready to break a pattern that has been repeating in your life quietly, invisibly, persistently. You're not stuck in the past. You're standing at the threshold of transformation. Because healing isn't about erasing the person. Healing is about reclaiming the part of yourself that was exposed through them. And that reclamation, that inner rising, is often the moment you begin to feel your own strength returning. Slowly at first, then unmistakably. This is the part of the journey where pain becomes clarity, where memory becomes meaning, where the wound becomes wisdom. And even though it still hurts, something inside you is shifting, deeply, quietly, permanently. So here you are, standing in the quiet after the storm, holding a story you didn't ask for, carrying emotions that were never meant to be yours alone. And maybe now you finally see the truth that was hiding beneath all the hurt. You were never really trying to forget them. You were trying to remember yourself. Because the moment someone wounds you deeply, something inside you splits. One part keeps moving forward, doing what life demands. The other part stays behind in the exact moment where the hurt happened. And the journey you've been on, the memories, the echoes, the constant circling back, has been the long walk toward retrieving that lost part of your soul. Carl Jung said, "The meeting with oneself is the point at which the healing begins." And that's what this entire struggle has been about. A meeting, a reunion, a return. You weren't obsessing. You were awakening. The person who hurt you was never the destination. They were the catalyst. A symbol, a mirror, a spark that lit up the dark corners of your inner world so you could finally see what needed attention, compassion, and understanding. And even though their role was painful, their impact pointed you towards something essential, your own depth, your own resilience, your own untapped strength. And now, slowly, gently, something begins to shift. The memory doesn't feel as sharp. The ache doesn't feel as heavy. The past stops pulling you backward because you've reclaimed the part of you that was left behind. You're not forgetting them. You're outgrowing the version of yourself that clung to them. You're stepping into a new inner space where your worth isn't tied to someone else's choices, where your heart doesn't confuse intensity with love, where your soul doesn't hand itself to people who cannot hold it. This is not weakness. This is emergence. The day will come, sooner than you think, when you'll look back and realize that the person who hurt you didn't break you. They broke the shell around the part of you that was waiting to rise. And when you rise, you don't rise back to who you were. You rise into who you were always meant to be.